there's never a point when we're done. We're constantly in this process of a dynamic, perpetual motion process of developing a habit. And I don't know, maybe when you become a Buddha, it doesn't feel like you're changing so much, but I think all the way to Buddhahood, it's a very dynamic, continual, perpetual refining, and I just have been noticing in myself this deeply embedded notion from forever that I somehow was going somewhere. I was going to Buddhahood. Hadn't until kind of recently internalized that the only thing that's changing is me. That here is, the workshop's right here. It's been a very, but I just found that the learning control surrounding my dietary habits has been has mirrored, because of it's so repetitive during the day. You're reminded that if I'm going to transform, I have to make a different choice. And that's sort of, and when the fork in the road, you take it, right? Yeah,
Well, I run a NAMI family support.
A what support group?
NAMI, National Association of Mental Illness.
Ah.
So it's a support group for families with people that have mental health.
But you speak up.
Anyways, we meet on Saturday mornings, and so I was there yesterday, and I was trying to, without using the word Buddhist or Buddhist philosophy, trying to get some of these people to kind of understand change happens, change always occurs, that what you experience now is not what you experienced in another time, that you have to focus on the present, and you can't deal with the past or the future. So I was trying to use this in a way to get them to think about their own specific situations and how, thinking about, what you do does, how you talk to your child, how you talk to the person who's affected is going to matter in terms of the reaction that you get. So you cause and effect kind of thing. So I find it very helpful, although I can't come out and, although they're all Christians and they're all believe in a God, so I can't come out and say,
Well, like we
It's
talked,
a
it
different philosophy.
depends on your definition of what God is anyway.
Anyway, yeah,
yours is a Catholic or
yeah,
Christian
it's
God?
a.
I know, but as a Buddhist, you can just say
Yeah.
God is supreme reality,
That's
so.
for you don't wanna try to change.
I'm not saying, all I'm saying is, as a Buddhist, you can relate
Right.
with all other people, you don't have to, it just doesn't have to be
What is
Buddhist.
that trying to say?
Yeah.
To do.
Yeah, and certainly aren't forcing it down anybody's throat.
No.
So we're here to change
Yeah.
our habits, that some of which have been embedded since primordial times.
Since the beginning.
Oh, I think they have been embedded
That's what they
since
say.
beginning of this.
I reread this.
Now Christopher.
And we don't have to discuss beginning of this time anymore, right?
I just read about your notes this morning, I just went over them this morning.
Hmm.
So, the beginningless time.
Well,
I think I just before. we
I'm
get-
totally on board with that, it makes sense to me.
And so, especially for the people that are newer to this group, the thing that we should always remember with, like, we're gonna say the prayers and we're studying philosophy. And you may ask yourself, because we want to get to the meat of the matter, well, how does this help me change from my unhelpful habits to my helpful habits? And the simple answer is we're following a recipe given handed down since the Buddha through this lineage of teachers. And they have told us that each element in this recipe is essential to getting to the outcome that we are all after, or the progressive, perpetual cascade of outcomes that we're anticipating. And so, as we embark in this philosophical conversation and the prayers and everything, just take it as, yeah, this actually has to do with changing your habits. And you're building motivation now at the beginning.
And the reason we wanna change our habits is so we can, be happy and not experience suffering and dissatisfaction and, mental anxiety. That's the purpose. That's the whole purpose of becoming enlightened. An enlightened being, I mean, I guess we should start with an enlightened being, this first the refuge prayer generated bodhicitta. What our teachers have asked us to do is to imagine in the space in front of us the Buddha like that. But we don't. Our tendency is to solidify and concretize everything and say, "There's the Buddha is like this," and it's not at all what it is. They say the whole reason it asks us to imagine them as being rainbow-like light is that there's no way you can grab that. Your hand would go right through rainbow light. It's not solid in that way. So a Buddha is a very, like the Buddha was saying, when somebody attains that level of enlightenment, it's not as if they've gone off somewhere and are living in a Buddha land, surrounded by all their little Buddha friends, and everything's fine with them, right? It is a very, very dynamic kind of process where the whole point, the reason for becoming enlightened is to be a benefit to other beings whom we are all connected to, interdependently connected, to benefit those beings. That's the purpose of becoming enlightened. So an enlightened being is always working to benefit others constantly. I mean, an enlightened being is very, very, very active, not just sitting there like that all the time, like the picture shows.
Right.
These pictures that they give us are very highly symbolic. And we've discussed that. We won't go into that. Every position, every piece of clothing, everything they're doing is a symbol. It's a psychological symbol of what they are representing to us. And every single Buddha can be interchanged with every single other Buddha. So every enlightened being has all the qualities of Shakyamuni Buddha. Shakyamuni Buddha has all the qualities of Chenrezig, has all the qualities of Manjushri, vice versa. You, as an enlightened being, you can embody all these qualities, whatever it takes, to be able to help somebody in a way that is going to be meaningful to them. So, for instance, if you're dealing with somebody who's not a Buddhist, who is a fundamental Christian, you don't have to bring Buddhism into this at all. But an enlightened being would see exactly what that fundamentalist Christian needs to help them become happy, to turn around their mind. And it may be a connection to God. That is fine. That's perfectly fine. The point is to be of help. Not to be a Buddhist,
Right.
not to concretize that. So when we're doing this first prayer, I think what we can do is we can imagine, that this Buddha made of this rainbow-like light that you can't even grasp, is basically in the space in front of us. And what that Buddha is representing is a safe direction that we can take in our life, because there are many, many, many different directions all of us could take. We all know this. We can follow our habits. We can follow our attachments down many, many roads that will lead us to suffering, basically. Ultimately, they lead to suffering. And so what the Buddha is telling us is that there is a direction that you can take, that the Buddha has taken and knows and can help us with, that is going to lead you step by step to this enlightenment where you can then be of benefit to all others. First of all, you're going to clean up your own act. You're going to clean up all the harmful habits that all of us have. All of us have harmful habits. It's so obvious and so clear. And it's because and we'll be getting into this today when we're talking about ultimate reality. The reason we have these harmful habits is that we grasp onto things as if they exist solidly, independently, self-existent, and then we want them to be a certain way. We want our parents to be a certain way. Our parents want their children to be a certain way. We want our boyfriend or girlfriend or spouse to be a certain way. And we kind of concretize them and reify them and put a big cloud around all of that. And as soon as they behave in a way that is not the way that we think they should, all these afflictive emotions rise. anger, jealousy, hatred, aversion. So this is the problem, is that we concretize and reify things. We give things an independent self-existence. And they say that this goes back to beginningless time of thinking of I and me and mine. And the Buddha is saying there is another direction we can take here, and I can show you the steps. So that's what this first prayer is about. So let's, with that in mind, and not reifying the Buddha as some concrete being out there, but a very, very dynamic, energetic consciousness that will help in any way that's going to be of benefit to us. So think of these prayers. We'll say it once in English and then 2 times in the Tibetan. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential I create by listening to teachings and the other paramitas, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye Tadang Soki Chognam La Jangchu Bardu Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinzo Gipe Sonam Ki Rola Penchir Sangye Drupal Shu Sangye Tadang Soki Chognam La Jangchu Bardu Dagni Gyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Rola Benchir Sangye Drupal Shu. And just in case we were tempted to be concretizing the Buddha here, just imagine now that emanating out of Buddha comes another Buddha. And this other Buddha is, the name of this Buddha is Chenrezig. This Buddha is called Shakyamuni Buddha. And what I would say is all, like I said before, Shakyamuni Buddha embodies every Buddha. Every Buddha embodies every other Buddha. These are different psychological and beneficial qualities that can be expressed through an enlightened being. So now we imagine coming out of the heart of Shakyamuni Buddha is this Buddha called Chenrezig. Chenrezig is made of white light. It's like rainbow white light, transparent. Chenrezig has 4 hands, 2 are in a prayer like this, and then he has 2 hands sticking out this way. What Chenrezig embodies or represents is immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable joy, and immeasurable equanimity, all directed out towards all of us. So Chenrezig's hands are in sort of this position here. This is immeasurable love, this is immeasurable compassion, and this love and compassion is holding like a sky blue colored jewel. And what this jewel represents is our own beginningless nature that has the ability to transform, to change. We all have the ability to change. We can change our habits. We can change the habits that are causing us all this trouble. We just need the right pathway and the direction and the understanding of how to do that and why we would do that. So Chenrezig is holding this capacity that all of us have to transform and to be happy and to be the being that we would love to be. So that's what these 2 hands of love and compassion are doing. They're holding us. Then he has, in his other hand, he has a mala, but this mala is made out of crystal. And he's constantly transmitting immeasurable joy to everybody. Immeasurable joy with the wish that may all beings be completely free of suffering, and completely have the causes to attain joy, happiness. And Chenrezig is constantly sending this prayer out. And then the other hand, over here, Chenrezig is holding a lotus. And what the lotus represents is a very psychological symbol. The lotus represents our ability, every one of our ability, to arise out of the muck and mud and confusion of our consciousness and our bad habits and our afflictive emotions and all the troubles and dissatisfactions that we have and addictions we have, and you name it. And we have the ability because we can transform, because we have that kind of consciousness, to rise out of that mud, just like a lotus does. And the stem comes out of the mud and blossoms into this incredibly beautiful flower, which is the flower of enlightenment, what we can be. So this is what Chenrezig is embodying and sending out to us. And as I say these next 4 measurable thoughts, imagine that Chenrezig is there sending this out to us. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And as we begin to take this on board ourselves, we'll realize, we can't be having enemies and friends, and a really good example going on now is in our media and the political system that is expressed through the media. It is very, very divisive. And as a Buddhist, we shouldn't even go there. We should not go into that divisiveness. We see everybody, every candidate, as having this ability to transform. Every candidate has the ability to rise from the muck and mud of all the afflictive emotions that we all have, and really become of benefit to others. So we shouldn't concretize any of that. As a Buddhist, we should not do that. So next we have, coming out of Shakyamuni Buddha, is Manjushri. Manjushri is the Buddha of wisdom. And this is the profound wisdom that understands the actual nature of reality. And again, Manjushri is a very symbolic, the way Manjushri is shown is very symbolic. Manjushri is a young male figure with a very, like around 16 years old, very, very fresh face. This is because when we actually realize the nature of what reality is, it's going to be fresh. It's going to be something new. It's not going to be something that we thought it was. Mm-hmm. And this is why they're having Manjushri as this 16-year-old, very fresh, very wise being. So normally we think of wise as, the long beard and old and like this. Manjushri is the opposite of that. Manjushri is like out there. And so Manjushri has this sword. It's a double-edged sword. And what it represents is that we have this very dualistic way of looking at things, self and other, subject and object, conventional reality, ultimate reality. We're very dualistic in our view. And the Buddhist wisdom is saying that's not the way things actually are. That dualism is coming from our own mind. Things don't actually exist in the dualistic nature the way they appear to us. So we'll be talking more about this today. So around this sword is this blaze of fire, and that's just saying this sword is able to transform, cut through all of that those dualistic views of self and other, subject, object, good and bad, and transform that into what reality actually is. And so coming from Manjushri's heart, he's holding again a stem of a lotus and is curving up this way. The lotus blossoms, and inside this lotus are the teachings on emptiness that the Buddha gave. It's like in a little book. And it's saying that by listening to these teachings, by studying these teachings, we will be able to awaken in our own heart the wisdom that we are capable of developing. And that wisdom is going to blossom into an enlightened being that we can become. So this is a very deep a mantra with a lot of meaning, and the mantra goes Om Ra Pa Sa Na Di. Om signifies this beginningless essence of reality, and reality is not just a universe of matter, but it's a universe and universes and universes of consciousness and matter. Consciousness is an essential element of existence. Without consciousness, there'd be no universe to experience. We couldn't postulate anything about the universe. Consciousness is part of what We are. And so that consciousness, that Om, it represents this beginningless essence of the nature of what reality is, and that it is constantly, constantly moving, like the breath. You take the breath in, the breath goes out. There's a little point where the breath sort of stops, and it's again in. So it's expansion, contraction, a period of, a moment in between, and an expansion and contraction. Now, there have been theories that this is the way the universe is. It's like the Big Bang theory. That theory is, of course, under question right now. So we'll just leave that alone. But we can see in everything, there are these cycles of things coming into being, things going out of being, then coming back into being. We just look at the flora and fauna, we look at the weather, we look at the tides, everything follows these kinds of cycles. Look at our breath, it does the same thing. So the nature of what the universe is, consciousness and matter, consciousness and form, consciousness and energy, I guess would be a better way of saying it. Consciousness and energy, is that it is constantly in this flux, in this motion, always changing, dependently arising. This is very, very important for us to understand how we can transform. So the next syllable of this mantra is Ah. And what Ah signifies is that the empty nature, the empty, dependently arising nature of self and phenomena is uncreated and without beginning. So this in and out, this constant movement of the universe, it's beginningless. And so our consciousness, therefore, is beginningless. Consciousness is beginningless. And we have it is not created, and it is beginningless. The second syllable, Ra. Ra is that the empty, dependently arising nature.
Yeah, the next one.
Ra. Is that what I said?
Yes, yeah.
Third, the next syllable. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, the next syllable. I'll just say the next
one,
syllable.
Yeah.
Ra is the empty nature of self and phenomena, is without stain or corruption. So what they're talking, what do you mean? I'm filled with stain and corruption. What they're talking about is this process, this actual process of dependent arising. Everything comes into existence through causes and conditions, and it's constantly moment to moment happening. Quantum physics will tell us this. We think this table, this solid table, you go down to the subatomic particles and it's all moving, it's energy, it's moving and it's changing constantly. Everything is this way. So so there is no corruption or stain to that process. It is just what the process is. So this process is uncorrupted and without any stain. It's just the way things are. We're the ones who are bringing the problem into it by trying to hold on to every moment and make it be some kind of existing independent thing that we can't let go of. We get very attached to things being a certain way. And this is what causes all of our problems. That's what causes the corruption in the state, not the process itself. The next syllable is Pa, which means the empty nature, the empty, dependently arising nature of self and phenomena is the ultimate truth. That's what the ultimate truth is, that everything is constantly arising moment to moment, depending on causes and conditions. Now, this is wonderful news because it means we can change. We can change. We just need to know how to do it and have the proper motivation of why we would do that. So this is pretty huge. And I think if we actually spend some time analyzing the way things are, we will see that this is so. What is being said here is so. The next syllable, Sa, is that the empty nature of self and phenomena does not die. And it's not reborn. So this process of dependent arising, it's not something that dies when we die. And it's not something that's reborn when a new being is born. It is always there. The process is always going on. This dependent arising. Na, now this is an important one, and I hope we'll have time to get into this. I think we will, because we're going to do it one of the first things. Na means that the names that we give to self and phenomena are merely labels. They're merely labels and nothing more than that, because the dependently arising empty nature of the self and phenomena that's behind the labels is It can't be gained and it can't be lost. So we give things names in order for us to interact with one another. These are glasses. We all understand what glasses are. They have a function. You know, this is a table. We all understand what a table is. It has a function. But underneath that, underneath the name and the label for all of these things, they are constantly part of this process of dependent arising and transformation and change. We know that eventually all of these things will, you know, the table will go down to dust eventually. So the most solid thing that we think exists is transformable, can change,
Does
and
change.
does change. It does change. Depending on what we do with it, we can, you know, how we direct it, we can change it for the worse or we can change it for the better. It is up to us and we need to understand how to do this.
That's key, because we're always changing, so
Mhm.
it's like steering a boat that's going 110 knots. You gotta put your hands on the steering.
At some point, and you gotta slow it down.
And
And you gotta turn,
you're
change
gonna be going
directions.
some direction or
Yeah.
another.
So the final syllable, and this is an important one, is D. This comes from the root, the Sanskrit root, which is Bud. And that's, it transliterates into English as Budh. Bud is where the word Buddha comes from. That means an awakened being. And that Buddha is the external appearance of an awakened being. The Buddha is the external appearance. There's also Bodhi, which is Bodhisattva. That is a being who is on this path, highly realized being, who is awakening, who is on the path to enlightenment. Then there's a term that we have not talked about. It's called Buddhi. And the D is the internal manifestation of what a Buddha is. The Buddha is the external, the D is the mind, the Buddhi. So when we're saying this last syllable, and we repeat this last syllable over and over at the end of the repetitions, D, what we're doing is we are awakening our wisdom. We're awakening our ability to discern and understand and concentrate and meditate. This is what the D is about. Now, this external, what I would say is a Buddha is neither male nor female. A Buddha is both, and a Buddha can manifest as a male, can manifest as a female, can manifest as a male and female together. We should get over these distinctions of male and female and understand that Buddha is just the external, you know, and usually external is considered male, and Buddhi is the internal, that would be considered female, but not as a sex, as an energy,
Okay, I was gonna say, I think it'd be helpful to deconstruct.
The reason I'm saying this is we tend to concretize, and so we need to deconcretize and go, okay, we're talking about energies here that we all have. We have this
Flowing.
internal flowing, external. You know, so the Buddha is out there helping everybody. The Buddhi is the mind of the Buddha. You know, the wisdom of the Buddha that understands the empty nature of everything that exists. So this is what we are with this mantra. We are we are working on this.
Okay, just real quick, the thing I wanted to remind you about is that discussion we had about language and words and energy, and how these syllables were decided upon by holy beings who experienced that these syllables set up an energetic pattern that reflects a thing they were trying to express in language.
Right.
So it's not just random, da means this and D means that. These syllables
They represent a
were
quality.
discovered, searched for and discovered by practitioners who came to the conclusion after many generations that this syllable has this energetic effect on the practitioner. This syllable has this energetic effect. And so these mantras are not just randomly selected syllables. They have been arrived at over many generations of having the energy impact that helps us transform.
What I would say, I totally agree. What I would say is these are ancient
Mhm.
energetic symbols. It comes from the Sanskrit. This is a Sanskrit mantra, Om
Mm.
Apat Sana Di. And we're talking about ancient Hinduism and earlier, when we get to these
Just
languages.
science of the mind.
Yeah,
Mind transformation
Right.
using energy produced. It's amazing, we can actually generate energy winds from our bodies. That's
Mhm.
kind of an amazing ability.
right. So when you understand what Kavita is saying and you say this mantra, you can actually start to experience this movement of what they call energetic winds. It's an energy that's within your system, within your body system. And you can start to experience the movement of that as you get, as you deepen your understanding with it. So let's just go say this mantra. And when we get to the end, we'll repeat the final syllable. When we get to the
Would you say
last,
it again slowly?
Om, A, Ra, Pa, Sa, Na, Di. When
Have us
we
repeat it,
repeat
do it
it,
syllable by syllable.
Om,
Om,
A,
ah,
Ra,
ra,
Pa,
ha,
Sa,
sa,
Na,
na,
Di.
di.
We will do some rounds of this, and then when we get to the final round, we will repeat the D over and over again, like D, 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 D. And imagine, think that you are awakening, your wisdom. You're awakening the Buddha nature within you that will be able to understand what we're about to be studying. Okay, here we go. Omara Batsana di 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 Batsana di Omara 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 Batsana di Di Omara Batsana 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 di So these.
I picture a bazooka shooting wisdom into myself, into myself.
I guess we've taken a lot of discussion, free time, and on these prayers, so we'll stop there with the prayers. It's a good place to stop, leaving it at wisdom.
So I would hate to do this because.
No, please do.
Do you
I have a question
Speak
that I'm
loudly.
trying to figure out. So everything is dependent arising,
Yes,
which means and then everything is a cause and effect and everything constantly changes, okay?
moment to moment.
So I'm thinking about the teachings of Buddha
Mhm.
and the 25 years since the Buddha's put down these teachings.
2,500 years.
Yeah, 2500, sorry. How they represent the pendant arising that's constantly changing. Because what I see is the Buddhist teachings are the one constant in all of what we study, and that, these are the parameters, these are the logic, this is how we think about these things, and that hasn't really changed for 2,500 years. Now, maybe it'll change in another 2,500 years, I don't know, but trying to get my head around this issue, this quality of dependent arising with respect that the Buddha says, these are the teachings, the path, the correct path forward.
Well, the thing is that we are constantly changing. We are living in quite a different time than 2,500 years ago. And we have a completely different understanding that we have of what science is, what the universe is, what the world itself is, the planet, and all this kind of stuff. We are different than the people were at the time of the Buddha, or that the Buddha who was living as a person at that time. And so when these teachings are being taught by current teachers who are part of this lineage, the teachings become alive for the time that they're in. And the teachings are given in a way that makes sense to the people who are who are receiving those teachings. And the whole point of, say, when Buddhism came to the West in a big way, when China invaded Tibet, and His Holiness and many of the Tibetans had to come to India, were refugees, and then Buddhism spread out to the world in a way that it never had spread out before. So we're in a very unusual time in terms of Buddhism. And wherever Buddhism has gone, even in the past, in the ancient past, when it went to China, India, Tibet, China, Japan, each culture would take the Buddhist teachings and adapt them to their particular culture and present them that way. This is the same thing that's happening right now in this room right now. We're adapting the Buddhist teachings to our culture and and our understanding of psychology and the way science is now, quantum physics, neuroscience. We are adapting the Buddhist teachings and seeing, do they fit? Do they make sense with this? And I will say from my own personal experience so far, yeah, they make total sense. It sort of even opens up the teachings in a way that I had never thought about. So for me, that's how I can see, because everything is constantly changing, and the world will continue to change.
Well, I don't think maybe either I didn't articulate my question clearly enough, or.
I
don't
understood you.
think-
If the Buddhist teachings are so, if what he said is in the nature of reality, then the nature of reality is not going to change. That
So-
nature
Okay,
is
that's
something that
that's
changes.
more to your point.
Right.
Yeah.
So more to your point, I'm gonna sort of just.
But I understand that, but I wanted to make sure that we know this is a different time.
Okay,
And Buddhism is being
Brian's
expressed in a
question
different
is-
way.
Brian's question more circulates around this question of, if everything is a dependent arising and constantly transforming, why are we still practicing the same way that they did 2,000 years ago? Why are we saying the same prayers?
Or why aren't those knowledge, ideas, strategies, thoughts,
Yeah,
Why hasn't it changed?
constructs, why are they not changing?
so
as
this
dependent?
is because I think it's because the nature of consciousness itself isn't conscious. It's kind of a conundrum, or almost a, what you call.
Yeah.
Consciousness is impermanent. And that is its nature perpetually. So the Buddha's trying to give formulas. So we're trying to practice recipes or formulas that take into account impermanence of the consciousness itself in the context of understanding the law of cause and effect. So taking it at a stripped down energetic level, consciousness is constantly changing, and that's a given. And how we utilize that consciousness from the standpoint of karma, we're either utilizing it to create positive beneficial patterns or negative destructive patterns. That would be the same 3,000 years ago and today. So in our practice, we're using the formulas for, if you strip down what Buddhism's doing, that's what we're doing. We're trying to take a perpetually dynamic consciousness and change its habit repertoire into beneficial and positive. That's always been the same. Remember, we come into this realm because we have this fundamental problem. So we're, as the type of being we are with this type of consciousness and discussing this type of problem, we come into the picture with some givens because we're in this realm, if you will. So, for beings that enter into this realm, we're caught between these two problems, or these two realities, creating beneficial habits and destructive habits. And the reason Manjushri is vital is because all we're really trying to do is understand, why do we keep doing that? And what can I do to change it? And so, this is why Manjushri comes into the picture, but they keep using the same format of teachings. I think the only thing I would say is that it is maybe counter to what you're positing, is that there's an aspect to this in this realm that's a constant, which is we're making a mistake. And so they keep offering. If you take away all the words and try and understand the core energetic meaning, forgetting about the words, that the problem hasn't changed, so the solution doesn't need to change until the
Right,
problem
is
changes.
existing.
Well, I think going back to your point, what I would say is we tend to not view, what we're talking about is impermanence as opposed to permanence. And when we say change, I'm not sure we think of change as being the same thing as impermanence. Change, we think, when you're saying change, why aren't the Buddhist teachings different? That's what you're saying, isn't it? How come the Buddhist teachings haven't changed from what they were? Right? Now, what the Buddha was pointing out was observing that everything is impermanent, is constantly in this process. When you, and we can observe the same thing. All we have to do is look around and we see it's always changing. All the cycles I was talking about, when we look at the universe, the cycles that are going on in the universe, everything is impermanent. That's just the way it is. The way it is. So far, we haven't seen that change, because if it went to permanent, everything would be over. It'd just be, everything would be frozen, rock solid, over. So what the Buddha is pointing out is something that is. So impermanence is. And so it's not, it doesn't mean that his observations that impermanence is going to change into something that says, no, everything's really permanent, because that's not the experience. That's not what can actually be observed. If you take it to its ultimate, if everything was permanent, the universe would shut down.
Okay, let
Right.
Brian speak.
I guess I'm I guess even the concept of impermanence as a permanent concept is difficult for me to digest if in fact everything is impermanent. You understand my
Sort of. Yeah,
Yeah.
funny conundrum.
and I don't want to.
No, I think Brian Bill has something to say
Yeah,
here.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, you've hit on a, this is a deep topic, and this is also something that I think is, relates to translation a lot, because the way I learned it, the Tibetan word, in English, we often sort of mistranslate. In Tibetan, it's Takpa and Mi Takpa, which is changing and unchanging. And we often translate them as permanent and impermanent, which are really not good translations of it. And so there are changing, dependent origination implies change, right? There are certain things, however, that are unchanging, such as the Dharmakaya, the emptiness of the Buddha's mind, or the emptiness of the enlightened mind. So it's a huge topic, and it's a good question, is my point. And I don't know, there's a lot there to unpack, I think. And I don't know, I just want to make that observation that, that there is a language issue here too, and I would have to go back. I could find some things about that specifically, where that sort of maybe I could share that offline or something.
No, that would be good.
Yeah, just because it's come up a lot with me, where I've read things where they use the translation permanent, and I'm like, that's not, at least how I was taught that. And then I'd look at what the Tibetan word is, and it's mitakpa, and that's really an unchanging and changing, and they're kind of not the same thing. And it trips us up a lot. And so it's a very good, you're onto something there, and there are things that are unchanging. The teachings, I think you could argue, I believe, and I would have to check, but are changing in the sense that they are a relative reality pointing away to an unchanging state of enlightenment. The teachings of the Buddha are changing in some ways, but what they're pointing to, because they change and they're presented depending on the mental capacities of different people, and they're presented in different ways. And Buddhas themselves, they talk about Buddhas passing away and then the next Buddha arising and going into nirvana. And, but, you know, so again, not permanent, but certain aspects of reality, I think, that we are aspiring for are unchanging, and which again is not quite the same thing as permanent. I don't know, because it implies a solidification. I don't know. I would need to dig into it more, but I just wanted to validate you're onto a good point, and there's a lot to unpack there, and it's a tricky topic.
Yeah, the other thing that never changes is the empty nature. It's not just the Dharmakaya. It is the empty nature of any kind of independent self-existence. That's just is not so. We can see through observation that there is no independent self-existence. It's impossible. And yet we feel that way about things. We feel that we're very solid. This is very solid. The world is very solid, but it's not. So basically, the Buddha has made an observation about what is.
You know, there's sort of another funny, this is just on a very mundane level, but they always talk about how lucky we are to have been born in an era where the Buddha's teachings are known and available, which kind of implies that they, you know, they get formulated, they come into being, they evolve, they develop, they flower, and then they say we're in a degenerate time. So in that sense, even they talk about the teachings as in a dynamic state of now they say, they label it for us in this realm on earth in samsara, they're degenerating. So they are changing. But anyway, it is, I mean, it is, Dr. Bales is helping us understand.
That's important. I think it's important.
That Dr. Herman seems to be.
No, your questions
always
are very
asking-
good, right?
We only just come now for the discourse between Dr. Bales and Dr.
Come on, that's boring.
No, the questions are very good.
I want to track the teachings, and again, I want to make it clear, I believe that there's a lot of logic to this, and the philosophy is appropriate, and the goal is good. I just, sometimes for whatever reason, these inconsistencies pop up in my mind when you're talking about these things, and I go, wait a minute. If in fact there is something that doesn't change, and all we're doing is spending all our lives saying everything changes, how do I square that with, you know, everything? And I can agree with everything else you guys have said, and the intent and all what we're after, and, you know, and even, you know, I change the way I teach students depending on how I need to get a certain concept across, but the concept is still a concept that they need to learn and understand.
Yeah.
And if, so, and maybe Brian's right, we have an issue of you know, language.
Oh, we
and that
definitely
would
do.
be
Absolutely do.
important. But you said it, Christopher, you know, impermanence is permanent. I mean, that is just fundamentally a basic concept that ain't changing.
Well, right. I mean, what you could say is that change, just from
That ain't
observation, change is.
It just means it exists.
It exists.
I take.
And if you follow the idea of unchange and permanence to its logical conclusion, you'll see that all that means
Right.
existence.
You know what, there's another big element that would be helpful to bring into the discussion, and I read this statement years ago. Words are just symbols of symbols. So we're in if you take it at a consciousness level, we have an array of appearances, and one of the appearances is a Buddhist lineage and a practice. Those are symbolic of a transformation. It's not the thing itself. And then we have all these words that try to describe it to us with the consciousness we have. So words being symbols of symbols. So the Buddha is a symbol, the path is a symbol, and then we have all these words associated with the symbols, and then it all,
The letters are simple.
and so when we use the word impermanent or changing or permanent and unchanging, or whatever word, those are symbolic of an energetic state, which itself is a symbol. The energetic state has to be understood at the what the energy of what are we talking about? What's the underlying essence even below? So it's kind of, I mean, do remember that Geshe Draka would say, these are the kind of things the monks argue about, the senior monks, the old monks argue about until they die. Meanwhile, they're doing their practices, they're meditating, and then when they die, some of them manifest their a different thing.
I think you could, two other words you could use that would be equivalence, you could say, maybe, is existence and non-existence.
Yeah.
Existence necessarily requires change. I mean, just look around, that's a fact, it's observable on every level.
No.
Non-existence, there's no change.
Okay, here's that quote.
It's
from
permanent.
Nagarjuna in another one of his texts. Whatever is dependently arisen, that is explained to be emptiness.
Emptiness.
That being dependent designation is itself the midway. Okay, but here's the part.
Those words-
Whatever is not dependently co-arisen, meaning whatever is not impermanent, does not exist. Therefore, a non-impermanent thing does not exist.
I didn't follow what you just said.
I know.
The
I'm
word,
just saying, Nagarjuna says it with other words in a different text.
this is why, Brian, you know how you said how difficult it is to read some of this stuff?
Yeah.
This is why we're using these words, and these great teachers are using these words to try to get across
Words are similar.
something that we actually have to experience for ourselves.
Right.
We have to experience, the whole point is to get us to a level of meditative concentration where we get it, it's like the penny drops, the bell rings, we open our eyes, we have this, Manjushri's youthful appearance, like, wow, I just got it. This is what's going on.
Right.
Again, you could argue that all you're doing is eventually convincing yourself of this.
No, you're
Idea.
experiencing.
It's
not
the
convincing.
placebo effect.
Well, no, I mean, but yeah, it's.
Well, but really, no, you have to
convincing.
bring logic into it, because convincing yourself sounds like you're not using logic at all,
Yeah,
You can use logic to convince yourself, just like you can be illogical to convince yourself.
Yeah.
I
That's
think,
okay.
All right, then you have to look at what exists.
again, I'm not trying to, I think.
It's true.
This Helen Keller story you had
Mhm.
a couple of weeks ago or last week
last week.
was.
Okay.
Couple of weeks, yeah.
How she, I got the water, I got it. Well, I could say, yeah, you learned that was water. It goes over your hand, it's cool, it's, it's spelled out, it's water. Oh, I made the connection, and then I could, yeah, well, that's bread, that's cake, I mean, they're labels for everything that, now I have some way to attach the label to a particular feeling or a particular sensation.
But what did that enable Helen Keller to do with her life?
Well, I guess your argument is it enabled, or not your argument, I guess the argument is that it enabled her to actually go forward and become the person that she.
And she was a person who was very beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely,
Right.
absolutely.
So this is always, I mean, we get back to the point of Buddhism, the point of the Buddha is to be a benefit. That we learn how to be, the Buddha is trying to benefit us so that we can remove our afflictive emotions, remove the cognitive obscurations we have that cause all of the frustration, the anger, fear, guilt, all of it. And then we can help others do the same. So that is basically raising up the level of happiness for all beings and removing the level of suffering. That's the actual point.
And then at some point you'll have an insight beyond, and send us a postcard when you.
Well, I think those insights are beyond words.
It could be in our current forms, when you When you have that direct experience, please send a postcard.
Yeah, when we're in a different form, Brian, we can all go, ah.
Remember us and send a postcard.
Remember when you were Christopher?
Could be waiting a long time.
Well, I-
Nathan,
Yeah, but like, oh no, the new theory, not Big Bang anymore, the new theory out there is there is no time. There is no time, everything is, I won't go into that today, but
anyway, it's,
Thank you
gosh,
for your indulgence.
no, it's a great question and it needs to be asked, and the way I get back to it is that, change represents existence. Unchange represents non-existence.
another metaphor for this type of discussion. It's actually more productive than the example I'm about to give, but if, I'm giving you directions how to get to Houston and you're trying to actually get to New Orleans. And you're getting very impatient with me telling you all about how to get to Houston, and then you're saying, no, I wanna get to New Orleans. And I'm saying, no, but you gotta get on I-10 and go through, Seguin and blah, blah, blah. No, I wanna get to New Orleans. I think we, maybe it's sort of a little bit like that. They just telling us how to get to New Orleans and we wanna know how to get to New York City or wherever.
Well, no, they aren't telling us how to get to
Wherever it
the
is,
final
yeah.
destination, but there is a path that you take.
Yeah.
I don't know, I think maybe there's some of these metaphors are somewhat helpful. And in the meantime, at least we can not
Hey,
hurt each other.
Like you said, Kavita, what's good to know is that, these highly, educated monks debate this stuff all the time. It's part of the debate, and, we have to become skilled at that.
Well, I
We
mean,
should.
I'm gonna just say, they kind of, my sense is they kind of get like this. Cause, after you're there 20 years before they can be a geshe, and then they've been a geshe, and they've been doing all this stuff for 20 more years, and they're 80 years old, and they're still arguing about shit like that, exactly like that.
Well, you know that for a fact.
Well, my sense is that
You're
Getting Drakpa, when we were studying the four tenets and we were talking about the quote highest, most deep, most subtle explanation of how things exist. I remember there was a question in one of the classes and Geshe Drakpa laughed, almost like Brian's question, and said, yeah, this is the kind of stuff we debate. I don't,
Okay, let's end this circular
Meanwhile, we
debate.
learn how to be more.
All right, and let's get into some kind of experiential something here. So, in the last session, that was session 19. There was a part where we talked about the self-grasping of persons and the self-grasping of phenomena, and Brian Bales brought up this wonderful example. In ancient times, in Nagarjuna's times, it was a chariot. Now we can use a car, because we all have experience with a car. And this shows us this little meditation that we're going to go through. Will show us in a way that is not subjective, because subjective is very difficult. When we start talking about I and me and mine, it's very difficult for us to objectively look at that. What we're going to do is an exercise where we objectively look at a car. And does that car exist independently? Or does it have a different kind of existence? The way we look at a car, we think that it exists as this independent thing out there. All right. So let's just go through that right now. Bring to mind a car that you're very familiar with. So imagine that car, right? If it helps to shut your eyes during this, please do. One method to realize that the car is empty of independent self-existence is to meditate on 4 essential points that examine the relationship of the car and the components that constitute the car. 1, this is the first point. Begin by identifying what is called in Buddhism the object of negation. This means the thing that is to be negated, which in this case is the car appearing to our mind as if it were an independently self-existent object. The car appears to our innate grasping as if it had its own nature. It seems to be self-existent, able to stand alone as an objective entity. So just think of your car, or the car you know. Imagine it now. And you're going, yeah, there it is. It's in the driveway, or wherever. Standing alone, independent entity, right? This is the way we perceive it. Second point. Now, while still holding the appearance of the car as a self-existent object, a corner of your mind goes through this process. If the car exists as it appears, then it must either be one with its parts, that is, identical to them, or it must be different from its parts, totally separate from them. There is no other possibility. Only these two choices are possible if the car has an independent self-existence, the way we think it does. Because an inherently independent self-existing thing cannot depend on any other factors. So you sort of logically take that into your mind as you're thinking of this car sitting there in your driveway looking like, well, it's just there, it is, it's what it is, it exists. Okay? So if the car actually existed the way it appears to us as this independent self-existing thing, it would either have to completely pervade or permeate all of its parts, or it would have to be something entirely different and not pervade its parts at all. When you can get your mind clear about this particular idea, you've understood what the second essential point is called in Buddhism, which is called ascertaining the pervasion. Now, I know those words, you go, what? But it's what I just said. Either the car itself permeates and pervades all of its parts, or it doesn't. And so you have to, you have to go think about that in your mind and think about, is that logical? The car actually, can the car exist as an independent self-existing thing? If it did, it would have to permeate all of its parts. Or it would have to be something else. Okay, third point. Next, while holding that appearance of an independently self-existing car, a corner of your mind investigates whether the car exists inherently or independently as it appears to you or not. Start with examining if the car is one and the same with its parts. That is, identical to them. The car is made of many components: the engine, wheels, axles, body, paint finish, seats, windows, etc. All of these components are themselves made up of many other parts and components, and so on, all the way down to the level of subatomic particles. If you try to search for the car in any of the parts that make up the car, a car won't be found in them. The car is not in the engine. The car is not in the wheels. The car is not in the ignition, and so on, down to the subatomic particles, which the car is not in them either. No car can be found in any of its parts. This is the third essential point, which is the object is not being inherently identical to its parts. Yeah, go ahead.
Is that why we have to say the car's floor mat, the car?
I'm getting there.
Okay,
On the other hand, if you try to search for the car apart from the components that make up the car, again, no car will be found that exists alone and separated from its parts. If you took away each of the parts of the car, the engine, the wheels, the ignition, and so on, one by one, and put them all together in a pile at one end of the driveway, there will be no car that remains alone and separated from its parts at the other end of the driveway. This is the fourth essential point. This is an analytical meditation that is getting to, is there some kind of inherently existing self? Okay? So this is the third point, which is the object not being inherently different from its parts. So it's not inherently the same, and it's not inherently different. So what we do is we project a kind of self onto the car. We project onto the label C-A-R, car, a kind of self or individual identity. For example, when referring to the parts that constitute the car, as Kabita said, we'll say the car's hood, or the car's sunroof, or the car's steering wheel, as if these parts belonged to the car and the car owned them. As long as we have a relatively neutral feeling about the car without any kind of special emotion related to it, the label car serves as a perfectly valid way in which we can conventionally communicate with one another about the car and its function. However, as soon as we think of the car as my car and grasp it as a truly existing thing that is related to me and is a reflection of me, how I see myself and how others see me, we no longer feel neutral about it, whether it's a shiny new Jaguar or an old beat up jalopy. We're far more concerned about my car as opposed to someone else's car. If we're concerned about someone else's car, then that has some relation to me and mine. It's like, that's my daughter's car. So it always, what the thing we're concerned about always is related to I or mine or me. The same goes for anything else we're concerned about and think of as mine. My job, my career, my income, my wife, my husband, my kids, my mother-in-law, my groceries in my shopping cart. Think about it. If you're walking through H-E-B and you have your groceries that you picked off the shelf and you put them in your shopping cart and somebody comes along and takes one of the things out of your shopping cart, that's mine, don't take that. Where there's more on the shelf, you know. But this is what we do. We do. It can get to the point of being ridiculous. But Buddhism this is a way of letting us know this is what we do. Not just about the car and the grocery, the grocery cart. We do it about ourselves. Once we grasp at anything as if it were inherently existent and related in some way to I, me, and mine, afflictive emotions of attachment, desire, aversion, or anger will arise. Will arise. So this is the key here. What's causing all of our problems is that the Buddha says all beings arise from I grasping, and that I grasping that we have is enveloped and surrounded by mind. So I and mine go together in this way that we think we're like the car. We think that we exist independently like the car. But if we were to analyze, and we'll do this next time, if we were to analyze the I and me, the same way we just analyzed the car, we're going to find that there is no independently self-existing I or me anywhere to be found. And this is the key to happiness. It's the key to happiness, because once we have gotten this I-mind thing onto things, then that creates all of the afflictive emotions we have. It's what drives all of our anger, all of our fear, all of our guilt, all of our, addictions. It drives all of it, the I and the me and the mine. And this takes a lot. It takes a lot to wrap your head around, which is why I took the example of the car. Brian Bales, I'm so glad you brought that up last week, Brian, because that's not in the commentary. So I was just sort of following the commentary, but it's such a good classic example that we can sort of go back to and wrap our minds around, and then we can sort of make a transference from that to actually me. What is me? What is mine? And to understand that as long as we view the car, that we're not attached to it in any way, like it's my car, it's a special car, it's a reflection of me, blah, blah, the way we are about ourselves, then it is perfectly fine. It's an easy way. It's what we need to do in order to communicate with one another. We need to call things, we need to label them, and we need to know what their function is, and we need to be able to communicate with one another how things work, and that's perfectly valid. That's called conventional reality, and that is perfectly valid. That this is called a what was it called?
A Yeti mug.
Yeti mug, yeah. But and these are called beads. Perfectly valid.
Mhm.
It's when we get attached to them. Don't you touch my Yeti mug. Don't you touch.
Ah, Yeti.
What are you doing using my beads? They have my energy on them. This is how we get.
How we concretize even, I always like to think of waves, how we concretize even things like waves.
Waves.
That wave was awesome. Did you see that wave? And this is.
Yeah.
A wave is a perfect example of what your question was, Brian, about permanence and change. This is a very good example, and we can see it all the time. All you have to do is look at waves coming and going at the beach, and we can see that they do not exist inherently or independently or anything like that. And they are constantly in a process of cycling up, cycling back down.
Yep.
That's just the way everything is. We can just see it in the wave.
Right.
But those waves are around us all the time. In everything we do. And so the Buddha is observing this and saying, this is what is.
Mhm.
This is what is. And when we try to hold on to that wave and say, this is my wave, I'm gonna ride it. Well, this is where all the afflictive emotions arise and all the problems arise.
Right.
Get off my wave, buddy, you catch another one, like that.
Yeah.
So this is getting to where are we here? The discussions have been really good and the questions have been really good. Brian, your questions as always
Yeah,
are really good. I would not feel bad about any question you ask.
no, it's still, would be.
Because you're bringing up really
Sorting
important
through.
things.
I only want to make sure everybody else gets what they need out of the teaching.
Well, this is part of what we all
It's
need.
all
though.
part of it.
Well,
Yeah.
due to their karma, causes and conditions and cosmic
Oh, God.
plan, everybody here is experiencing their karma ripening moment by moment.
Okay, so what is the ultimate nature of reality?
Rose
And the
blood.
thing is, you can say this in a sentence, but it's not gonna do much good. Nagarjuna now begins an extensive explanation in his precious Garland of the ultimate nature of reality, so we can develop the wisdom that realizes the emptiness of inherent existence. Just like we were thinking the car itself doesn't have any inherent independent self-existence. And when I think it does and attach to it and think that it's mine, all kinds of problems can arise. Wow, look at road rage, my God.
Mhm.
So the reason why the Buddha is telling us about emptiness of inherent existence is to help us. This realization will completely remove the ego self-grasping ignorance that keeps us bound to the suffering of cyclic existence. According to the Buddha, innate ego self-grasping or I-grasping has existed beginninglessly in our mind streams, our consciousness, our stream of consciousness. And it automatically goes with us from one life to the next, whatever that is. Whatever that is. Whether we're going into, some kind of altered state, where we're going on to another planet, into a different universe, into something we think of as deep blackness. But simply hearing that it's not enough, because it's very difficult for us to uproot innate eye grasping, because it is so primordially ingrained in our subjective consciousness. It's very hard for us to objectively look at it, like we did with the car. It's subjective. It's very difficult. So here it is. The ultimate nature of reality is the momentary, dependently arising nature of self and phenomena that is utterly empty of any kind of independent self-existence. The ultimate nature of reality is the momentary, dependently arising nature of self and phenomena that is utterly empty of any kind of independent self-existence. But simply hearing this statement doesn't give us the psychological tools or the meditative concentration that we must have in order to realize this.
Right.
We can hear this till we're blue in the
Concept.
face and just go, whatever,
Yeah.
you know?
You know, it's, I mean, it actually says a lot about our consciousness and the formation of habits, how incredibly powerful it is in the face of the nature of reality as perpetually changing, that we can actually make statements like, oh, I'm not very disciplined, as if it's some permanent state.
Well, this is what we do.
I mean, it's kind of amazing that we are able, in the face of obvious change happening, that we somehow
somehow-
exempt ourselves.
We somehow think we can't change.
Yeah,
Right.
There are certain things about us that we just can't change. This is just the way I am. This is what we
Yeah.
say.
Oh, I hear people say, oh, that's just the
Just
way.
I
it
can't
is."
change.
It drives me nuts,
Right.
because no, that's the way it is at the moment. It can shift and change.
but you can
It is
see,
our
I mean, it
habit.
says a
We
lot
can
about
shift
the
and
power
change.
of the consciousness.
Well, right,
to
exactly.
forming the habit, this is what I'm
Right,
getting
and so
at,
what
I think
what the
is-
Buddhist teachings, what the Buddha is teaching us is that no, the nature of things is that they do change, that they can flow, and that means you can change too. Your consciousness can change. Not only your consciousness, but the whole trajectory of your being of existence can change.
Right.
Even the form that you're in can change.
You know, I would say consciousness is changing, but
It is.
we keep repeating the
We
same,
go around
moment
in
by
circles.
moment, we repeat the same pattern.
It's like a
We
hamster.
developed a belief in the pattern, and so we keep recreating the same.
A
habit.
hamster going around in a wheel.
Right.
Well, that wheel is moving. There is impermanence happening there. It's changing. It's not staying the same, but it's just going around in circles, and this is what we do.
And then it becomes a physiological response. I mean,
It-
you know, you got,
Absolutely.
there are neural pathways that start developing,
You're absolutely right.
you know, I mean, with any addiction, habit, you know, self-harm. You know, we develop those neural connections. And the more we do that, the more the brain forms a concrete, you know,
And that becomes like a,
behavior.
what do you call a direct pathway
Yeah.
that is completely functioning, you know? These neural pathways that are basically, there's really not, we can't blame ourselves for this. We can't blame ourselves, and we can't say it's my fault because
Right.
I've done this. This is just what we do. So we have these incredible habits that taken to extremes, and we see it all the time, go into very destructive kinds of addictions that are very, very difficult to get out of, as you say, because we have developed that pathway so it's so clear, you know, the connection.
The rut in the road.
It's,
You know,
it's like the gerbil in the wheel.
This book that I read, Atomic Habits, goes into some of the current scientific thinking of habits. And one of the things that was fascinating is our repetitive habits are conditionings that depend on the external stimulus. And it's a perpetual one habit and action leads to the next, leads to the next, leads to the next. And it's all integrated with our sense perception. So one of the things they say is, like, simplistically, to change a habit, it's easier, like if you go on retreat to another place that you're not normally in, because all of the visual cues that cause that trigger
The
some of the
habit.
habits
Yeah.
are gone.
Right.
They actually make the statement that, I thought this was fascinating, because Christopher's sister went into rehab a couple of times and ultimately she would fall off the wagon again. And this guy was saying in this book, and this applies to all of us, regardless of what our pattern is. You get back into similar visual, like say if you go back home or back to a setting that has the same
Triggers.
feel,
Yeah.
you end up, you know,
Going back.
at a non-conscious level, these things start firing off. And the next thing you know, you're getting back into a groove that you thought had been rebuilt. I mean, I remember we went on a 10-day retreat. This was quite a few years ago. And I felt like I was changed forever. I remember when we were driving back from San Antonio, we went to a restaurant to have hamburgers, and I looked around at all the people in the restaurant, and I genuinely felt this incredible sense of love and tender care for just these every single person I laid my eyes on, and it was genuine. And I thought, wow, this 10-day retreat really changed me. And I mean, it was profound, and I, thought, this is it, I've finally arrived, I'm a nice person.
Enlightened.
Then we get home, and as we've all experienced, if you've ever been on a retreat or in a similar situation, little by little, here I was again, calling so-and-so an asshole and this and that, but
There's
and
the career, I know.
and then we all know the experience, when you've developed a mental profile of somebody, you just have to look at them and feel hatred and aversion. I mean, we see that so much nowadays.
Yeah.
I mean, and you can do converse if you're a mother or a child, or you have your beloved cat or dog or horse or whatever, and you look at them and love flows out. So what this guy is saying is, and this is important for all of us, part of the practice is to make our physical environment support the new habits we want to develop.
Yeah.
That's why Arthur's in the best position, because he's always traveling.
You go, Arthur.
Arthur seems to have
He's
fallen
got
off
a-
the session, but.
Yeah, no Wi-Fi. maybe.
This is why the Buddha has given us the practices that that we have.
Right.
So the whole point of this, if this is a daily practice, say of the 7-limb practice, and what you're doing in the 7-limb practice is you're sort of developing your good qualities, and you go through a whole visualization process, which includes your body. So you're really making it part of who you are, where you are saying, I'm changing the direction of my habits. I'm changing the direction of my bad habits, and I'm replacing those with good habits. And we're the only ones that can do it.
Yeah.
And we have to do it regularly and consistently, because that's how habits are formed. And that's how we have formed all of our bad habits, which we all have.
Yeah, right.
It's a slog. I mean, there's a fork in the road each moment, and you have to go, all right, do I want to be this or that forever? Or do I see myself as, able to change? And you are able to change. You are changing because in that moment of decision, that's a moment you're grabbing how you're going to be in the next moment. And you have always the choice to grab in the next moment to be a different way, another way, or the same way, whichever.
And it is a process, and we will fail, because that's just the nature, because of the habits are quote unquote bad habits. The habits that cause harm to ourselves and others are so strong that they're going to keep arising when the triggers are there for them. It's like, oh my God, there's the trigger. So we can't always be escaping to a retreat.
Right.
We can't, but it helps. It helps initially, because it gives us some space. We need to create a space for ourselves in wherever we live, so that we have that space, a particular time of day or whatever, to do these practices where we're changing our habits from destructive habits to beneficial habits for ourselves and for others. And we will fail, and that's fine. We just have to keep persevering with it, keep going with it.
There's one time we won't fail, because we can change. We have the ability to change.
The thing that's really important, and I notice this a lot in this dropping weight process, when it gets difficult, the trigger hits you and your automatic response is happening, actually, that's when you're able to change. It doesn't happen when you're in retreat, just meditating on holy, wonderful, beautiful, precious, calm things. That's not where you're changing. You're building a toolkit so that when it gets difficult, there's some chance you can have a different response. That's where the change is happening.
Right.
That's where you build the new habit, not when it's easy on your meditation cushion or in retreat. Important
Yeah, there's
to
a,
note that it's, when it's hard, is not the moment to go, oh my God, look at me, I'm angry and what a failure. No, when it's hard and you're angry and you're reacting is when you go, this is my moment, what am I gonna do?
Yeah, yeah.
in the 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas, there's one of the practices that says, when these afflictive emotions in me arise, and I am, tempted to act on them, stand like a lion amid all of these thoughts. It's the way of practice, 37 practices, the Bodhisattva. Oh, is that Shantideva? Shantideva, okay, thank you, Shantideva. Stand like a lion. He also does the one about the wood, right?
Yeah, this one that's like a log.
And when
Like a
something,
lion.
yeah, so this is Shantideva, 37 practices have some good ones too, but Shantideva says, be like a lion. Strong, firm, stand, and you just have these foxes running around you and they can't hurt you. The other one is when something comes up, somebody does something or says something to you that's going to trigger, something afflictive, whatever it may be, like, yeah, you asshole. Be like a piece of wood. Just like a piece of wood. So these visuals help, but you have to practice them. You have to hear them repeatedly. Brian knows this. You listen to those things every day, they start to go into your head. They start to become of your
voice.
they become sort of like your box of tools. It's your toolkit.
But again, I wanna emphasize, it's only in the moment when you're about to fail.
It's
that
in
you
the
can
moment.
change the habit. When you're about to do the thing,
Right,
that's the moment of change.
right.
That's where the transformation habits like weightlifting it. If it's easy, you won't build it.
Mm. But in those moments between, it's about to change.
Right,
You keep building the muscle.
You keep,
Yeah.
You keep building the muscle.
yeah.
eventually.
You know.
Christopher's sister, one time when she fell off the wagon, it was because she heard a song on the radio that reminded her of all of her lifetime of failure. Because it was some song from her past when life was full of promise, and it triggered her feeling of in the present day she hadn't fulfilled. And I mean, it caused her months and years of.
No, she was off the wagon for 2 years.
And so you kind
Yeah.
of just go. In that moment, if she'd only had the tools to go, just hold on. I can
Change the station.
We have to want to change too.
Yeah,
Well,
We
that's-
have to really want to change. So, because sometimes what we do is we think, okay. I can keep the habits that I like and, and go on the path to enlightenment. I can have, it's sort of like, I can have my cake and eat it too. I can have my cyclic existence
Yeah,
and go to enlightenment too. And it's not that way. But we want to do that. We want to bring along these. There's any addiction that we have. There's a moment. There's a period where that thing, whatever the addiction, it feels good. It feels good. Ah, this is the relief I was looking for, right? But the problem is that relief turns around and bites you in the ass. Temporary.
Mhm.
It's temporary. So we have to realize that and go, no, I cannot bring this along with me. This is not going to be part of, my enlightenment. And this is part of the job we have. That's part of our job. So as a bodhisattva, it's like you're a warrior. Well, who are you fighting? You're fighting your own ego. You're fighting your own mind. You're fighting your own habits. That's the warrior.
Can you read Nagarjuna's The Nature of Reality again in this context?
I must admit, this is not taken from Nagarjuna. This is taken from my years of study.
Okay, whatever.
The ultimate nature of reality is the momentary, dependently arising nature of self and phenomena that is utterly empty of any kind of independent self-existence.
That's very, so in that moment,
Moment to
the
moment.
nature of reality is,
There is no
It's
independently
open-
existing,
every possibility is open.
right? And this requires practice, like, we just said, yes, the moment occurs, but you're not going to make the decision that's gonna be beneficial for you if you haven't practiced in between those moments that occur.
You have to break down those neural pathways.
Yeah,
They're
Yeah.
still gonna be there, and when you get triggered, you're gonna rebuild some of that, but you have to be consistent. And that's where meditation. Sometimes, like I'm journaling, when I journal in the morning, my mind, whatever comes up in the morning, just get it out on paper and all the negativity and all the things that start racing through my mind that are habitual,
Mhm.
built up from experiences, bad or good, but journaling and meditation, obviously, like you guys do, I think is so important, to break down those neural pathways.
that's really what it's about.
Yeah, that's what,
That is what it's about, breaking down.
Because every moment has a preceding moment.
And in the
It's
morning,
slowing that space
what we're
down.
doing is trying to develop the ability to see a harmful neural pathway about to actualize.
And
I
then
mean, that's what, mindfulness
Choose better
meditation.
I'm guilty, of that. I need to do that, I've gotta be disciplined and do that.
And in
And-
that
And
moment,
I've done it where every morning I do it, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, like you're saying, you start falling off.
Mhm.
And you get back into your old habits, and there's old Kavita showing up,
And I
Damn you all.
I mean, this is stupid to always, I'm using my current weight loss thing, like, I'm eating out of the ice cream container the other night going, and I'm going, this is not the way change is gonna happen. Where's that, carb smart, we're eating carb smart ice cream, but unfortunately, I've learned you can eat too much carb smart.
Well, you can eat more because it's less calories.
But I went all this in my mind, I'm going, this is ridiculous. And here I am.
I think it's really good to have a sense of humor too. It is.
Yeah.
I mean, if we can
Can't
lighten
take
up a little
yourself too
bit,
serious.
we can take ourselves really seriously, and that's when we want to kill ourselves. But and that won't do any good. I mean,
Right.
because we
And
just
I
keep
think
going
the
on.
hardest thing is when you're dealing with loved ones or,
Well, because they're stuck in their habits too.
Oh god, the history, the interconnected history.
Yeah, you can't make other people do what you want them to do.
No.
You need to just
Change you, work on you.
change the person that you
Yeah.
are and.
We're responsible for our reactions,
That's
basically.
it.
It is.
Okay, we're gonna have to wind this
But
down.
I've got to get to the top of the lunch.
This is good. Okay. Let's see, what do I wanna, we can just do one of these. And I think maybe we'll do,
Let's do both.
okay, well, let's do, at the bottom of the where it says dedication prayers, let's do the one about emptiness. And then let's do the one about, the final dedication about the lamas. Because we need this view to grow. May the view of emptiness not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. And then the final dedication on the last page. In all my lives, may I not be separated from true lamas, and so enjoy the splendor of Dharma, fully perfecting the virtues of levels and paths. May I speedily attain the state of Vajradhara. Vajradhara is represents the innate capacity that all of us have to become enlightened. Yeah. Okay.
Don't forget, these are all symbols of symbols, these words of
Symbols of symbols.
the task is
Interesting.
to plumb the depths.
Geshe Nima would be so happy with all of this conversation. That's what he wants us to be doing.
Sometimes watch these YouTube
Yeah.
recordings and he's very proud of us all.
Yeah.
By the way, thanks to Brian Herman and his work in Minnesota, Geshe Nima will be here in November.
All right, it'll be definitely similar.
He'll be here in
In
December.
December,
Tenzin
okay,
Ketsu.
Tenzin Ketson will be.
okay,
here.
okay.
And they're gonna teach us something, but we haven't decided yet. They want us to decide. So,
Can we have a dumpling party?
Oh,
what?
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, no, oh, you Momo,
Oh,
right?
momos.
Momo, are you
Yeah,
kidding?
yeah, please.
Momo parties are part of the whole
Yeah.
Thing.
package.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they'll be massive.
Okay,
Yeah.
lovely Zoom people.
Call the Momo.
Pleasure having
Have a
you.
little thing
Thank you for
there.
any comments and support that you have given us.
Really, where is it located?
And I will end our, what you call, recording.
Recording.
Yeah.
What's the